Thanks, everybody, and good afternoon. No, it's still good morning. Barbara!
Hello.
Hi!
Hi, everyone. Hello. Missing you already.
Everybody meet Barbara Maas.
Hello. Nice to be with you.
Barbara, we're going to come back to you. I'm going to start the presentation. I'm going to do your bio and start the presentation. Jump in anytime you want, okay?
Thank you so much.
Okay. Dr. Barbara Maas has worked on... No?
Yeah, honestly, I'm nearly there.
In international wildlife conservation for over 2 decades and on every continent. Her deep sense of kinship for and commitment to the natural world has been the guiding theme throughout her life. A wildlife biologist by training, she studied at the University of Cambridge before taking up a postdoctoral position at the University of Oxford. She lived in the Serengeti National Park for 5 years, studying bat-eared foxes, and has worked as an advisor and chief executive to international conservation and animal welfare groups for 19 years. Throughout her career, Barbara spearheaded and played a key role in a diverse range of international wildlife conservation successes and campaigns. She also contributed to numerous nature films and books. In 2001, Barbara moved to New Zealand to work as a civil servant in marine conservation. As the manager of New Zealand's Protected Species Bycatch Mitigation Program, Barbara first became aware of the plight of Maui's and Hector's dolphins, about which this presentation is. 12 years and many hundreds of square miles of protected ocean later, her efforts have developed into an expanding international movement which has lifted the Maui's and Hector's dolphins out of anonymity. Barbara works as the German NGO Nabu International Head of Endangered Species Conservation. Last month, she was also appointed Secretary for the Environment and Conservation of the International Buddhist Confederation. So welcome, Barbara. We have a little more than 5 minutes for this, so we're going to go through this quickly. There's 134,000 slides, so I'm going to try to flip through them really quickly. Meet the world's rarest marine dolphin. The facts in a nutshell. Why is this happening? What the experts say, and where do we go from here? Isn't that the theme for this whole conference? Here they are. Maui's dolphins are a subspecies of Hector's dolphins. They were named in 2001. The smallest species on Earth. Rarest dolphin species on Earth. New Zealand's only endemic dolphin species. In the 1970s, the numbers were 30,000 Hector's dolphins. I think we just lost her.
Okay.
Today, 7,200 of Hectors, and the population trend is declining. If ever there was a country and a nation that should be concerned about conservation of a species, it would be New Zealand. Their motto is 100% pure New Zealand. It's on all the tourism brochures. It's the big draw. 100% pure. They are anything but 100% pure. They're mostly sometimes kind of not really 100% pure. You'll see why.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. This is New Zealand North and South Island. Hectors are mostly relegated to the southern island, and Maui's to the north. In the blue are the Hectors, and the red are Maui's, particularly in the northwest of the North Island. They inhabit the shallow waters up to 200 meters in depth. Difficult to distinguish visually, and the numbers are so few. That was a question that was on my mind. How do we know the difference? So it's basically where they are, where they can be found. The number now is officially, according to this, Barbara's latest number, it was 55, and you'll see on all the Save the Maui's Dolphins, it was saved the last 55, it's now down to 50. So I think, Barbara's the expert, I think that there were at least 2 or 3 found between 2012 and 2013 that were found dead. That, of course, doesn't reflect the numbers that are actually dead. Those are just that were found. Those are the numbers that were found. In the South Island, 7,000. Interesting, I was tripped up on this too. The inter-island migration rate is about 1%, and I thought, well, that's kind of insignificant, but when you think about 1% of 50 dolphins, that's very significant. So you'll see in the slides to follow that the projected, the area that needs to be protected does allow the space between the North and South Island for migration for even that 1%. It's worth noting. In the 1970s, the numbers were 1,800 Maui's dolphins. Today, 50 individuals. Population trend declining. 97% since the 1970s, basically due to, drum roll please, what do you think? Fishing. Okay, so 95% of human-induced mortality among Maui's dolphins is the commercial gill netting, recreational gill netting, customary gill netting, and there's a whole family wiped out. Also pollution, nothing new. Boat strikes, oil and gas exploration, oil and gas mining, and sand mining, which is proposed of late, in spite of all the 30 years of science. This is the extent of gill nets in New Zealand, 3,000 meters for commercial gill nets. That's an awfully large space. And the amateur or recreational gill nets up to 60 meters. Death traps. So this is an interesting fact. The estimated death toll is 2.33 to 2.48 Maui's dolphins per year for the commercial gill netting. And then for the recreational, I'll get to that. Interesting thing about that is that the fish hang in the nets for sometimes days, and so by the time it's lifted and brought to port, it's too old and too dead to export, so it's mainly consumed within New Zealand. So you end up seeing it as fish and chips, which is wildly popular. And that's going to be a key factor. Listen for this later on in the presentation. We'll see why that's so important. So then the recreational and customary gill netting also results in an estimated death toll of 2.01 to 2.18 Maui's. So you add the 2 plus and the 2 plus between the commercial and the recreational. And that's, about 5 Maui's per year when there's only 50 left. You can see in the dark circle where the dolphin is so close to the nets. They were traumatic there. So, Maui's can only cope with a death, one death every 10 to 23 years, and we're getting about 5 every year. So, that turns out to be 75.5% times of the sustainable limit of death. 1970 numbers, extinction 2032. Just gonna pause on that for a moment. So here's that map. The red area shows where the Maui's inhabit the shallow waters up to 100 meters in depth. Unprotected. Only about 15% of the dolphin's range is protected, and that's in the green. And the salient feature of this particular slide is to just note that the proposed protection measures that are being implemented fall gravely short of the area that's needed to protect. This is a really frightening map. I don't know how clear it is to anybody that's viewing it online. I don't even know if it's clear for you here, but I think the thing to note, this is the North Island, is that the red is the habitat for the Maui's dolphin. And if you look at the light green, I don't know quite, but if you look at the light green spot, that's where gill netting is allowed. It's just unspeakable. And the proposals that have been accepted are not sufficient to stop the dolphins decline. And I think even if the people who aren't scientists in the room and the people who aren't scientists that are watching this, it's pretty apparent. So, hope is not lost. The push is to protect 100% of the habitat, and the campaign has been to turn the Red Sea green. And you can see that little area between the North and South Island that I was speaking of earlier. It's unprotected and it needs to be protected just to allow for that 1% to migrate between North and South Island. The world's leading scientists agree harmful fishing methods must be banned across the dolphins' habitat if they are to have any chance of survival. So the scientific committee issued recommendations in 2012 and 2013. A motion was passed by the IUCN in 2012, and there were 3 presidential letters sent this year. On behalf of 30 years of science, the motion was adopted with 117 governmental and 459 NGO votes in favor. Who do you think voted against? New Zealand was the only opposing vote. Barbara, are you still there?
I'm looking at Florida.
Okay. Okay. So here's the top scientists, researchers, Steve Dawson and Liz Slooten. Dr. Steve Dawson, Dr. Liz Slooten. This is Dr. Dawson's photo. The problem with the Mauis is that their reproduction is extremely slow, so if they didn't have enough working against them, their longevity is 20 to 25 years, but they can breed between the ages of 6 and 9, so if we lose one that's even younger than that, and it happens to be a female, you can see how devastating it would be. Basically, scientifically, which I'm not an expert at, it just means that the growth rate would be, under extreme good situation, would be 2%. So it would be 1 additional individual per year for a population of 5, but we're losing 5 per year. So you can do the math. From a biological perspective, Mauis are not doomed to extinction. Genetic diversity among Mauis is relatively low, but higher than expected for a population that's so small. Scientists are optimistic that Mauis can recover if the human-induced mortality is reduced. And that brings us back to eliminating all of the fishing in their habitat. There have been 3 rounds of public consultations in the past 16 months, but there is no decision and the dolphins keep dying in the nets. We are in a race against time. Critically endangered on the IUCN Red List. So here we go. Why is it happening? A powerful, unprincipled fishing industry that denies responsibility. It's not our fault. We're not fishing in their area. I never find any dead Mauis. I don't know what you're talking about. Weak legislation that is almost wholly discretionary and biased. I want to say came into the fishing industry, but that's not in this presentation. Lack of awareness in New Zealand and elsewhere. I don't know if anybody had heard about the Maui's dolphins before WCA or had been part of the Maui's campaigns that have been online for at least a couple of years, but I didn't know anything about Maui's before I think I don't even remember how I found out, but I know when we table and we present around here in New England and we ask people if they have any idea about the Maui's dolphins, they have no idea. New Zealand is out of sight, out of mind. Maybe they travel there. There's huge tourism push, but a lot of people don't even really know about the situation. And I'm astounded at the lack of press, international press, on the issue. Here's the defunct conservation efforts because there are politically motivated rather than science-based decisions being made in New Zealand. Management actions lack conservation targets or goals. Strong dependence on the fishing industry, lack of public awareness again, and lack of political will. Here are all the effects of preying on the Mauis. Trawling, gill nets, lost ghost nets, invasive research, pollution, tourism, boat collisions, and sand mining, oil and gas exploration, marine farming, and overfishing. So, where are we? Extinction is the most likely outcome. All of us need to do something about it. Turn the Red Sea green. Liaise with your lobby officials, lobby with your officials, politicians in the fishing industry. There are sign-on letters by multiple NGOs. There have been tens of thousands of submissions. We need more even yet. I think the number is 24,000 on the latest petition, but it needs to be quadruple that. There is the visual petition. I know, Scott, I don't know how you're doing on that today, but where there's a visual petition that you can sign on to. HectorsDolphins.com. On Facebook, it's Hector's and Maui's Dolphin SOS. On Twitter, it's at Hector's Maui's SOS. You can acquire leaflets, posters, flyers, and reports. Avail yourself to the information, educate yourself about the situation. Don't think there's a more critical campaign at this point. If you know, let me know. I don't know. Again, I'm not a scientist. We need funding. We have recently joined the WWC and Nabu and Mission Blue all are in alliance together. There's Dr. Maas giving a public talk. There have been rallies in New Zealand. I think about a year ago, 20 NGOs signed an alliance, signed a petition that went to the government. There is global will. Dr. Sylvia Earle is the founder of Mission Blue Alliance, and she came, I think it was 2012, she joined the force. Will Trubridge, who is a world champion freediver, has a lot of campaign information. He actually did an ad underwater. Well, I don't know if he did it underwater, but he was underwater, and then they dubbed in the sound. So, and Jean-Michel, of course. So these are ocean guides that have rallied to support the campaign. So the number is 1,800, and now just 50. So here's the important thing to remember. This is the takeaway from this talk today. And I think that this is being announced probably for the first time. Here's where we go from here. The greatest scientists and the minds have gotten together and tried to do something, and all the science is in. There can't be any more science left. The numbers are there. It's a waste of time to try to do any more science. So we have to take it to the next level. We have to brainstorm, what do we do from here? It seems hopeless. So the campaign that's going to be launched is that we are setting up a Maui's and Hector's Dolphin Legal Defense Fund. And there's going to be a brand attack on New Zealand seafood. That's the only way in that the leaders have agreed. So money talks, and the Legal Defense Fund will be in place for future legal action, and I'm not going to elaborate on that anymore, but there's just nothing left to do besides that. And if we can, is Barbara on? Okay. And Barbara says thank you for the Maui support.
How do you got hired?
I'm not cheap.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. And
Barbara, we're going to take questions from the audience here. Can you hear?
So questions next. Please talk loudly into the microphone so hopefully Barbara can hear.
My question is, how would you convince a small commercial fisherman to change his practices if that is their only form of income?
the answer to this is we have fixed it with the responsible ministry dealing for a while. We believe that in a situation the government should do is to buy out a small number of net fishers in New Zealand. This is a matter of New Zealand dollars. We think that the New Zealand government has $1 billion for the year last month. The blackness is coming, environmentally speaking. So tens of thousands, tens of millions to save the species, to buy out something, seems like an easy thing to do. And that is what we need to do. Basically, they don't have the money. So we try to see can shift that negotiation. Fishermen over to here, fishing techniques, but it's taken to think that they can go one change set nets or birds go friendly. Some can shift quickly, others can't and have to stop. And I think the opportunity to be had is not like how is it 50 boats, 5 or 4? Do they go 10 miles or 50 miles further that way, or 50 miles further that way? What we have the animals there, which are very few females there. Is New Zealand a country that would let species go extinct for the sake of a $20 billion, which is considerably less than US? And maybe this, maybe that's about, I don't know, that's what we have to decide. But to talk about, as the industry has said, to say that we don't know enough about it to warrant exclusion zones for fishing and further expansion. This is generous. This is because the discussion has been going this years, is why we are. We now need to teach that we need to have a quantity change, and we have tried to gauge the fishing industry. Bottom of where, so we don't really know what else. There seems to be no other option. There's a Maui dolphin standing about protection. If they miss it this time, if they miss out this time, they're not going to be another round and plan negotiations. It's as simple as that. It's now on.
Barbara, thank you for that. We're going to cut your visual, if that's okay, just because we have some acoustic problems, but hopefully that will help. So apologies, we're not going to see you, but we still want you to keep talking. So next question from Bill.
Barbara, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. This is a very delicate question for you, and you're certainly welcome to say that you don't want to deal with it. For many of us that have been trying to help the Maui dolphin situation, the intractable position by the government has been a great puzzle, particularly with all the public support worldwide. We understand that there's a possibility that some of this is complicated by native rights, the Maori rights to fish. The politics of going against the Maori or containing them in some way or affecting their treaty rights is holding back the government's decisions to fully protect the Maoris. Is this possibly true? And is there a solution for those of us outside to help?
I'm not sure that here. Because, I mean, yes, Maui fish own a lot the fishing one. But there is an equally strong with the Maori group that would like to take it. For example, we actually talks with some Maori about playing under the Treaty of Waitangi for the destruction of, I hate this word, a marine resource, like marine dolphins or any other creature. It's but if under the against the for the loss of this, which is all right, the government is obliged to maintain its maintaining resources of the ocean that belong to our groups. I think what we're seeing is the fact that the chairman of the National Party, which is at the party at the moment, being the president of the New Zealand Party, called Fishing. I think that has something to do with the fact that
Barbara, excuse me, this is Patty. Can you just do me a favor? We're still having trouble hearing you. Can you just lean in to the computer, and since you're off the video, we won't see you. So if you're off,
Yes.
sorry. See if that helps a little bit.
Yes, okay. So I don't know if you heard any of this. Is it better?
Much. Thank you.
Yes. Otherwise, you would just be seeing my big mouth, and that would be scary. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you heard any of this.
Okay, hey, so just looking at the presentation here, I saw sort of two issues. One issue was money, the second issue was getting people involved. And you know, the program that's worked very well over here are these number plates. You know, when people buy a number plate, and the government might like that because, you know, you can offset the funding that's needed by selling the number plates, and then the number plate is almost a badge that everybody carries that shows that they care about Hector's dolphins or Maui's dolphins. I mean, it might not work on the timeline, but I don't know if you've thought about that, but it's an approach that actually the government might like and people might like, and it brings in money and raises awareness.
It's a good idea in the US, but in New Zealand, there are number plates signed on. There are no, you know, there's nothing but numbers on the license plates.
It's time for you to tell them to change that.
Oh, my goodness. That's sort of paperwork. Yes.
I just had a quick question. If the Hector's dolphin around the South Island are facing the same impacts of mortality from fishing similar to the Maui's dolphin, and what's the situation with them?
It's a really good question. The situation is pretty much the same, except that we're slightly on the curve of decline in Maui instead we are. So the North Island was settled first. And so the fishing, the development of fishing, commercial fishing was more advanced there and more quickly. So much wider than their range and their numbers have not been contracted, but their range has massively contracted. It really is custom class stand. So fast forward 50, 100 years, and you will see the very same situation for hectares. If you look at the number, for example, the population on the south of the South Island and some of the East Coast population, which are genetically distinct, are already very small, and hectares as a whole also decline.
Thank you.
Okay, so last question. Okay, last question. Anyone?
Hi, Barbara. Scott Leonard here.
Hi, Scott.
How are you? Hey, look,
I'm all right.
hey, good. One of the slides talked about raising popular awareness of Maui, and that included both internationally and in New Zealand. And I know personally that we still have an issue with raising the awareness amongst the New Zealand public about what a Maui dolphin is. And I too often get that discussion where I ask a Kiwi friend of mine, what's a Maui, and they have no idea. So, do you have comment on that? And of course that goes back to our discussions about branding.
Yes, I think I don't want to be too much afraid about the campaign that is coming up, Scott, but what I say to you is that we are aware brand, and I think you will like it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara.